And now, from Nashville Public Television's Studio A, celebrating authors, literature, and ideas for more than 3 decades, this is A Word on Words with John Seigenthaler.
Hello, I'm John Seigenthaler. Once again, welcome to A Word on Words. My guest today, Alan Johnson, Jr. Over the last decade, he's written a trilogy of adventure books for middle grader readers or anyone who enjoys a good adventure story. The Blackwater novels includes My Brother's Story, The Dead House, and A Nest of Snakes. Stories follow identical twins, Johnny and Will, who orphaned, separated as toddlers. They struggle to reunite, even though their adoptive homes are in different states. Many of the twins' adventures come from Alan's own experiences, both good and bad. Alan, thank you for being there.
John,
wonderful to have you talk about what's really a new literary project. This series of books focused on, I want to say young boys, but I'll tell you, having read Den House and My Brother's Story, boys and girls and their parents and grandparents are all going to enjoy getting into these stories. And you and I can remember a time in our own youth when it was, for me, the Rover Boys, it was...
the Hardy Boys.
The Hardy Boys.
Yeah.
And Tom Swift. Pick up one, finish another, and there was another one in the bookstore waiting on you. This almost recreate this idea. This publisher almost recreates that genre of our youth.
Yes, sir.
And it goes back a while.
It does.
Talk a little bit about. Let's talk at the outset about those middle grade readers that these books are focused at.
Well, John, I tell people I'm a pretty good writer, but I was a genius at being a boy. I was good at it. Yeah, I was good at that. I did too. And it's been my whole life has been fun, but none of it as much fun as when I was a boy. And so I was lucky because I had a large extended family, Southern family, that I grew up in, and storytelling was a kind of a informal tradition in our family. So I grew up with people telling stories around me. So, and that's what I view myself as, really, as a storyteller. And so when I started writing, I wanted to write positive stuff. And it occurred to me that by writing through the voice of a boy, which I know how to be a boy. I mean, I don't know how to be a girl, but I know.
I've almost forgotten, but I can remember it too.
Oh, I remember it. I haven't forgotten any of it. And so I started, when I got onto this project, I wrote in the voice of a young boy.
Well, let's talk about how you got onto this project.
Yeah.
How did this come about?
Well, I was writing for children. I was living in Alabama at the time, and I was writing for children. And I wrote for young children, and then I wrote what they call a chapter book, which is slightly older for like second, third graders type thing. And I guess I got my confidence up, and I decided to write a novel. So I wrote My Brother's Story, which was published some years ago, but the publisher failed, went out of business about a week after the book came out. So the book really never had exposure. So recently, when I decided to try to turn it into a series, George, my publisher, George Schnitzer at Premium Press America, was interested in doing the whole series.
Well, they've done a terrific job with the first 3. Let's let the audience look at the covers.
Great.
First of all, maybe Maybe we could look at Dead House. There it is. And that's pretty gripping. And then the next is My Brother's Story. And there we are. And finally, A Nest of Snakes, which is the next to come.
Yes.
But beyond that, there are really wonderful illustrations in the book.
Yeah.
Black and white. Let's just take a look quickly at two or three of those.
Yep.
That's by Kelly McMorris. And how did you all work together, if at all?
Yes, well, I was very lucky to be able to work with her because, after all, she's trying to capture the feeling.
What you've written,
the feeling of.
I think she's done it very well.
She has, but sometimes I had to work with her to make sure that the illustrations followed the.
She captured the part of the story that you were telling.
Yeah, and to make sure they were true to the text.
Sure.
And she's brilliant, and all of these illustrations, believe it or not, are done on computer, including the covers.
Well, that's one of the remarkable things about what George Tennyson has done here, I think, is use the new technology to provide traditional stories,
right,
which kids are going to love.
Yeah.
Not kids alone. I enjoyed more than I can tell you. Let's talk about My Dead House.
The Dead House.
I mean, this is the first of the series, I guess. Maybe My Brother's
Second.
Story is first. This is the second.
Right.
But this is the first one I ran across. Captured my imagination, caught me, pulled me inside.
Right.
And let's talk about character building. The characters in this book, primary characters in this book are kids, but not the only characters in the book. And where do they come from?
Where do they come from? Well, the Dead House is mainly set in a fictional swamp called the Blackwater Swamp, and on the Blackwater River, outside of a fictional town called
Turpentine, Alabama.
Georgia. And it bounces back and forth between.
Where is Turpentine, Georgia, really?
It's 100 miles south of Savannah.
I believe I read that in your book.
Yes. And so the boy, the narrator of the Georgia part of the book is a boy named Rad Fox. And he's
Dad's dead.
His father died, and he lives with his widowed mother.
His widowed mother, and pretty early in the book, its result is an old friend of the family, medical doctor, has a son who's had some problems.
Right. Who is also a doctor.
Also a doctor, and had been a doctor during the war.
Yeah.
And had suffered from patients he lost.
Yeah, correct.
And he comes to town, and comes to Turpentine, takes up residence with the lad and his mom.
He becomes a boarder with them.
And I could have told you at the outset you were going to have the doctor marry Mama.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Did
suppose.
you know you were going there?
Not really. But when I start writing, sometimes these characters start doing things I don't know.
Well, that's so often the case with novelists, and
Yeah.
they get away from you.
They do, and it's exciting because things just start happening, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, this doctor is a decent man and seems to understand how young boys love adventure. And the old Granger place is there.
Yeah.
It is, I think, readers would best understand if we called it a haunted house.
It's a haunted house.
Every kid I knew who grew up in our neighborhood, I mean, we had a haunted house. you go to kill a mockingbird, and you can come to believe that Boo Radley lives in a haunted house for a good period of that book.
Yes. Yes.
But it's pretty exciting for these kids to sort of flirt with approaching that house. Talk about who they are and how that comes about.
Well, the hero of all of these books is a black guy named Link.
Link.
Which is short for Abraham Lincoln Frazier.
Right.
And Link takes in Johnny in the first book and shelters him when he's after he's run away. And so in the second book, Johnny comes with his twin brother. The two of them come to visit Link. So they get to meet.
Second book being the Dead House.
Being the Dead House. So there's narrative in the Dead House also set in Alabama. So it bounces back and forth between Alabama and Georgia. Anyway, Johnny and Will come to Georgia and to visit with Link, and they get exposed to this haunted house too. And there is a ghost in this house, and it's a bad ghost.
Oh, it's really bad.
Very bad. And it gets pretty scary.
Oh yeah, I remember that moment they find the body hanging there.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to give too much of that.
No, but I'll tell you.
Away.
I'll tell you. The book has twists and turns.
Yeah.
But the constant is the fright that the boys have for the Granger place.
Yeah, that's constant. But there's something else that I'm interested that's kind of a constant in the whole series, and that is the love that goes on between the races. And it's important to me for people to know that happened in my time. There's been so much bad press about racial conflict and so forth, but actually, when I was a boy, there was a lot of love going on between the races.
Well, and I think there are moments when Link becomes something close to a surrogate father.
Correct.
Before the young doctor moves in.
That's right.
And becomes a surrogate father, Link is already reaching out and making sure he's a protector, an advisor.
He's smart, too.
Very smart.
Yeah.
He's not just swamp-wise.
No.
He's street-wise.
Yeah.
Knows his way around and is going to make sure this lad is well taken care of.
Yes, and at the same time, his love for this boy, which actually happens in the first book. It's Johnny that he befriends, and Johnny, the relationship that develops there, also helps to pull Link out of being
and the first book is my brother's story.
Correct, but Link has become a recluse, almost a hermit, and when he takes in Johnny changes Link so that Link no longer wants to be alone. And so they affect each other in a very powerful way, because Johnny gets this love from an adult, and Link, when he gets this love from Johnny, no longer wants to withdraw from life.
Well, let's talk about Mama for a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Because she's a powerful figure. Peripheral to the story, but key part of it.
Now you're talking about the Dead House now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mama is struggling because she's lost her husband and her father, who was the mentor to
Jace.
Jason, who was the mentor to Red Fox, and he was bringing him up. So the action.
Going to make sure that this young boy, Red, our hero, is well guided in his early years,
right,
formative years.
Yeah, but then he dies. So they're both kind of they're both left bereft. And so when this Dr. Mason, Jordan Mason, comes, it's a godsend.
He's been in the war. He's really, it's almost what we used to call a nervous breakdown.
He did.
He's looking for a place to get away and collapse and relax.
And recover.
That's right. And she takes him in.
And she takes him in.
As a boarder.
Yeah. And she encourages him that he feels like he's a weak person from having collapsed, but he's actually been through stuff that would have collapsed anybody.
Well, he's been through the hell of war.
The hell of war.
And he's having trouble getting away from that.
That's
you know, it's interesting how nightmares find their way into your stories.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the doctor is having nightmares about the war, and the young boy is having nightmares about this house, this haunted house.
Absolutely.
And the ghost.
Right.
So the two of them are keeping the mother up. She's not getting any sleep. So, but that all kind of works out.
It just fits into the pattern of the story. Let me just say, for those of you just tuning in, I'm talking with Alan Johnson Jr. about his adventure series, the Blackwater novels, and we're focusing on the dead house.
Right.
What a wonderful title for a haunted house. Let's talk about the Granger place. It's there. It's in that swamp area.
It's on the river.
And they have to go by boat to get there.
Right.
And they keep flirting with going in, with going in. And then finally, the horror of what's inside.
That's right. But I don't want to give all that away. You know.
Sure, I understand.
It's that's kind of the That's one of the climaxes of the book.
That's a great story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was fun to write. It was fun to write. I got totally into these kids. You know.
And to Link as well. I think I know Link as well as I know Johnny.
Yeah. When I grew up, black people were doing most of the menial work. Of course, nowadays Mexicans are doing it. But the result was that a lot of us were exposed either to a cook or a yard man or some black person who worked for the family.
And quite often had to play a role as a surrogate parent.
Yeah, no question about it. In fact, I got my first learning about honesty from our cook. I mean, she nailed me for pretending to have a sore throat and trying to get out of school. She absolutely told me, you know, she knew what I was doing. But my point was that when you're around black people growing up, they became at that time kind of part of the family, and they helped to raise us, you know, the children. And the result of that is that you feel almost like you're part black yourself because you've been brought up.
You give us Link and you give us Maggie.
Yeah.
Who's the best cook in the world.
Yeah.
In the history of the South or the North.
Yeah.
Or the world.
Yeah.
I mean, her fried chicken, you know, there's nothing like it.
That's it. But the thing is, when it comes to writing the dialect of the time, I mean, this is a historical piece. It goes back. The dialect has changed, but I'm writing the dialect that was going on then, and it's just part of my DNA.
Did you struggle with the dialect at all, or did it just
it just comes
come back?
It comes right out of me, just because I was partly brought up by black people, and it's part of my heart. You know, it's part of who I am.
Did it ever worry you that you were going to be able to get it just right?
The dialect?
Yeah.
No, sir. It's totally organic with
Well,
me.
it flows. It is organic.
Yeah. It just comes out of me.
Now, you're telling what amounts to a you're telling what amounts to a ghost story.
Yes, it is a ghost story.
It is a ghost story.
Yes, sir.
In traditional sense, it's a ghost story.
Yep.
And you know, there were a lot of kids' stories that are ghost stories.
Yeah.
Did you know where you were going at the end? At the beginning, did you know where you were going at the end?
When I wrote these books, my problem is that I tend to resolve things too quickly. And, you know, if you're going along writing a book and you resolve it too soon, you don't have a book. So most of my books have a major resolution that goes on in the middle of the book. And then there's a kind of a secondary problem that develops. And then that has to get resolved too.
Sure.
So that's kind of the way it's happened for me. I don't know why. But
well, it shows up very well in Dead House.
Yeah.
And in my brother's story.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the third in the series yet to come.
Yes, sir.
A Nest of Snakes.
Yes. A Nest of Snakes has a problem with the Ku Klux Klan. And I have dedicated that third book to Morris Dees, who's the co-founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center. He's somebody I've always admired.
And the man who probably knows more about the Ku Klux Klan and has analyzed it and has exposed it and has
done more
and has sued it.
Yes, he's done more to break it up than anybody. And I mean, he's just an amazing guy. And he and I were at the University of Alabama together, although I didn't know him there. But that's when they were trying to integrate the school. And he had the gift of being a lawyer, and so he was able to do something about this terrible problem, you know, the hate groups and so forth. Now I'm trying to do a little bit myself.
Well, you certainly are, and I think you're moving in the right direction. You can't come away from these books without understanding good and evil as they existed in that time.
Yeah.
And clearly, a good deal of it has to do with race.
It does. But my experience was that the good people in the South never got into racial hatred. I mean, really what it's all about is the good people versus the bad people. Now that sounds simplistic.
Well, I think if we go back to that racist time, we both knew good and evil are part of our lives, even though we at that time perhaps didn't understand the depth of it.
Oh no, not as children. I didn't understand it at all. But
and I think part of that was our parents sought to shield us and screen us. But it was reality. It was there. It was there to be seen and understood if you look closely at it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The point I try to make in these books is that a lot of love existed between the good people of both races. And when I was a boy, you know, I was in many homes, and including friends' homes, my extended family's homes, and I was exposed to many interactions between the races. And in my entire boyhood, I never saw one interracial interaction that wasn't characterized by love or respect. See, now that's different from, say, a book.
Oh, and the whole world around you, there is violence.
Yeah.
Lynching is reality.
Oh, yeah.
Racism is reality.
But among the good people, see, I must have grown up with some pretty good people, because I never saw anything that didn't include love and respect. And so, and that point needs to be made, because there's so much exposure to the bad stuff that went on. And people don't believe it, but there was a lot of love going on between the races.
But you know, by injecting the Klan in this nest of snakes,
right.
You give a clear understanding that you understood, clear understanding that you understood there was a dark side
I understand it now.
to that Southern life, yes.
And I understood it as I grew up. As a child, I didn't. But when I was a young man, I was in the audience when Nat King Cole was attacked. So when you see stuff like that, there's no way that you can't understand.
And it reminds you where we are and where we were.
Yeah.
And I think some of those memories are unforgettable.
Oh, no question. No question. I will never forget that. I mean, that was really an amazing thing.
And I take it that's sort of an undercurrent of A Nest of Snakes, the third book in the trilogy.
Yeah, well, the fact is there are people in the South, everywhere really, that are into hatred. And you have to, I mean, unless you want to stick your head in the sand, you have to face up to that.
It's there. We saw it.
Yeah.
I think these books demonstrate an understanding
Yes.
of the love that existed, but also with A Nest of Snakes, with the hostility.
That's correct.
We're about to run out of time. Amazingly, how a half hour flies by.
It sure does.
But what's next after these three books? They're already written. What's your next project?
John, I haven't even thought about it. I'm an old guy.
Welcome to my world.
But I'm also a jazz guitar player. So if I run out of stuff to write about, I can always go back to my guitar.
You can go back to the guitar?
Yeah.
You can even write about the guitar.
Well, I have done. I've written for Just Jazz Guitar magazine.
Well, that's great. Well, it's great to have you here to talk about this trilogy, and I commend it to all young readers, including my grandson. He has two of the three books in hand. And,
Wonderful.
I'm waiting on the reviews to come in. I know they're going to be terrific. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, John, for having me.
And thanks to all of you for watching. I'm John Seigenthaler. For A Word on Words, keep reading.